The rain-swollen river rushed with terrifying power, sweeping Penelope Garner beneath its murky surface, just as her fingertips slipped from the branch she had desperately clung to. The frigid water filled her lungs as she fought against the current, the weight of her sodden skirts dragging her down into the darkness. This was how she would die, she thought, alone in an unfamiliar land, with no one to mourn her passing. But fate had other plans. As consciousness began to fade, strong arms encircled her waist, pulling her upward with determined force. Breaking through the surface, she gasped for air, coughing violently as her rescuer dragged her toward the riverbank. "Hold on," a deep voice commanded over the roaring waters. "I've got you." Through blurred vision, Penelope saw a man's face, jaw clenched with exertion as he battled the current. His hat was gone, dark hair plastered to his forehead, revealing eyes the color of burnished copper focused intently on reaching the shore. With one powerful arm wrapped around her and the other cutting through the water, he fought against nature's fury until his boots finally found purchase on the muddy riverbed. Staggering up the bank, he collapsed with her onto solid ground, both of them heaving for breath. He shifted to his knees, gently turning her onto her side as she continued to expel water from her lungs. "You're safe now, madam," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. His large hand moved in comforting circles on her back. "Just breathe." When Penelope could finally draw a proper breath, she looked up at her savior, a cowboy with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed quickly by disbelief. "Penny," he whispered, using a name she hadn't heard in years. Through chattering teeth, she studied him more closely, and the years fell away. "Hunter Adams." His expression transformed from shock to something fierce and protective as he pulled her closer, sheltering her from the relentless rain with his body. "I'm not letting go again," he said, the words both a promise and a confession of past regret. Penelope shivered, not entirely from the cold. 8 years had passed since she'd last seen Hunter Adams ride out of her life. Now here he was, holding her as if she were something precious, something he'd lost and miraculously found again on the banks of this raging river in the Utah Territory. 1876. The storm continued to rage around them, but Hunter was already helping her to her feet. "My cabin's not far," he said, wrapping his drenched coat around her shoulders. "Can you walk?" Penelope nodded, though her legs trembled beneath her. Hunter seemed to sense her weakness and swept her into his arms without warning. "Put me down," she protested weakly. "I can manage." "Not taking chances with you, Penny. Not anymore." His jaw was set in that stubborn way she remembered all too well from their youth in Missouri. The rain pelted them as Hunter carried her through stands of pine and across open meadows. Penelope found herself studying his face, the features she once knew by heart, now matured into those of a man. The boy she had loved had grown harder, more weathered, with fine lines at the corners of his eyes, and a scar along his jawline that hadn't been there before. "How did you end up in that river?" he asked, his breath creating small clouds in the cool mountain air. "My stagecoach overturned several miles back. The driver, he didn't make it." Her voice caught. "I tried to find help, but the storm worsened and I lost my way. The river was rushing so fast and I slipped." Hunter's arms tightened around her. "You could have died." "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you for finding me." "Finding you," he repeated, a strange note in his voice. "Of all the rivers in all the territories." A small cabin came into view, nestled against a hillside with a corral off to one side. A sorrel horse nickered from beneath a lean-to shelter, and smoke curled from the stone chimney. "You have someone here?" Penelope asked, suddenly aware of her compromising position. "Just passing through," Hunter replied. Been working as a guide for settlers heading to Oregon. This is a line cabin owned by the Broken Spur Ranch. I've been helping the foreman clear mountain lions from their north pastures." Using his shoulder to push open the door, Hunter carried her inside the humble dwelling. A small fire burned in the hearth, casting warm light over the sparse furnishings: a narrow bed, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a trunk against one wall. He set her gently on a chair near the fire. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said matter-of-factly, moving to the trunk and pulling out a flannel shirt and wool trousers that would swallow her whole. "These will have to do." He placed the dry clothing in her hands, then turned toward the door. "I'll check on my horse. Give you some privacy." The door closed behind him before Penelope could thank him. With trembling fingers, she began to unbutton her sodden dress, her mind racing with questions. What were the odds of Hunter Adams being the one to pull her from that river? After all these years, after all that had happened between them. She had come west to start anew, to escape the whispers and pitying glances that followed her through the streets of her hometown after Frederick's death. Her journey to Provo to stay with her cousin was supposed to be the beginning of her healing. Instead, the past had literally pulled her from the water. By the time Hunter returned, she had changed into his clothes, wrapped a blanket around herself, and was attempting to comb through her tangled hair with her fingers. He carried more firewood, which he added to the hearth before hanging their wet clothes on a line strung across one corner of the cabin. "Storm's not letting up," he observed, removing his boots and setting them by the fire. "We're stuck here till morning at least." Penelope nodded, watching as he moved about the cabin with easy familiarity. She hadn't expected to ever see him again, let alone be alone with him in such close quarters. The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken words and memories neither seemed ready to address. "Are you hungry?" he asked finally, breaking the tension. "I've got beans and bacon, not much else." "That would be wonderful, thank you." Hunter set about preparing a simple meal, his movements efficient as he worked at the small cast-iron stove. Penelope watched him, noting how the firelight caught in his dark hair, now drying into unruly waves. He'd always been handsome, but time had sculpted his features into something more compelling: a face that told stories of hardship and adventure. "You've changed," she said softly. Hunter glanced over his shoulder, a half-smile playing at his lips. "So have you." "Have I?" She touched her hair self-consciously. "You're more beautiful than I remembered." The words seemed to surprise him as much as her, and he quickly turned back to his cooking. Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "Hunter, don't," he interrupted. "We don't need to talk about the past tonight. You've been through enough." But the past sat between them like a third person at the table as they ate their simple meal. Memories of summer days by the creek, stolen kisses behind her father's barn, promises whispered under starlit skies. And then the day he'd ridden away, leaving only a hastily written note that she'd read until the paper wore thin. "Why did you leave Missouri?" she asked finally, setting down her empty plate. Hunter stared into his coffee cup as if it held answers. "You know why. Your father made it clear I wasn't good enough for his daughter. A ranch hand with no prospects, no family name worth mentioning." "But you never gave me a choice," she said, old hurt creeping into her voice. "You just disappeared." His eyes met hers, dark with regret. "I was 20 years old, Penny, too proud to stay where I wasn't wanted, too foolish to fight for what mattered." He ran a hand through his hair. "By the time I realized my mistake, you were engaged to Frederick Walton." The name hung in the air between them. Frederick the banker's son, the suitable match her father had approved of, the man she'd married, the man she'd buried 2 years ago. "Frederick died," she said quietly. Influenza took him, along with so many others in town. Hunter's expression softened. I'm sorry, Penny. I heard about it when I passed through Springfield last year. I wanted to come see you, but... He trailed off. But what? But I figured you wouldn't want to see the man who abandoned you. The rawness in his voice made her heart ache. Penelope stared into the flames, considering her next words carefully. I was angry for a long time. Hurt. But I understood eventually. My father could be formidable when he wanted something. Or didn't want something, Hunter added with a wry smile. A gust of wind rattled the cabin windows, and Penelope shivered despite the warmth of the fire. Hunter immediately stood, retrieving another blanket from the trunk. You should take the bed, he said, draping the blanket around her shoulders. His fingers brushed against her neck, sending an unexpected spark through her. I'll sleep by the fire. Thank you, she murmured, suddenly aware of how close he stood, of the scent of pine and leather that clung to him even after their river ordeal. Hunter stepped away, clearing their dishes with methodical movements. So you're headed to Provo? He asked over his shoulder. Yes, my cousin Martha lives there with her husband. She wrote that the town is growing, that there might be opportunities for a widow with teaching experience. Penelope hesitated. And you? Where are you headed next? Nowhere particular, he answered. Been drifting for years now. Guide work pays well enough, and I've saved a bit. Thought I might look for land of my own one day. In Utah Territory, maybe. It's good country if you don't mind the winters. He paused in his work, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Never thought I'd see you out here, Penny. You always talked about staying close to home. Home changed, she said simply. After my father passed last year, there wasn't much holding me there anymore. Hunter nodded, understanding in his eyes. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. Like being swept away by a river and rescued by a ghost from your past, Penelope said with a small smile. Ghost, am I? Hunter chuckled, the sound warming something deep inside her. Flesh and blood enough to pull you from that water. For which I am eternally grateful. Her voice softened. I truly thought I was going to die today, Hunter. He crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling before her chair. His hands, rough with calluses, gently took hers. When I saw you go under, when I realized it was you. He shook his head, unable to continue. Penelope squeezed his hands. You were always my protector, even when we were children. Remember when Billy Sorensen pushed me into the mud and you bloodied his nose? Got the worst whipping of my life for that, Hunter recalled with a rueful smile. Worth it, though. Their laughter faded into comfortable silence, hands still joined between them. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside the cabin, a different kind of weather was brewing, the slow, uncertain awakening of feelings long buried. You should rest, Hunter said finally, reluctantly releasing her hands. Tomorrow I'll take you to Provo. Penelope nodded, suddenly exhausted. The events of the day, the stagecoach accident, the river, the miraculous reunion crashed over her in a wave of fatigue. She moved to the narrow bed, settling beneath the blankets as Hunter banked the fire for the night. Hunter, she called softly as he spread his bedroll on the floor. Yes, I'm glad it was you who found me today. In the dim light, she saw his smile, the same smile that had captured her heart when she was 16 years old. So am I, Penny, so am I. As she drifted toward sleep, Penelope heard him whisper once more, almost to himself, and this time I'm not letting go. Dawn broke clear and cold, the storm having spent its fury during the night. Penelope woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, finding Hunter already dressed and moving quietly about the cabin. Morning, he said when he noticed her watching. How are you feeling? She took a moment to assess. Her body ached from the river's battering, but she was alive. Sore, but well enough. Your clothes are still damp, Hunter noted, nodding toward where they hung. "You might be more comfortable riding in mine today." Penelope sat up, clutching the blanket around her. "Riding to Provo. It's about 15 miles south. We can make it by midday if we start soon." He poured coffee into a tin cup and brought it to her. "Unless you'd rather wait for the next stage coach. Might be days, though, with the roads washed out." "No," she said quickly, accepting the cup. "I've had enough of stage coaches for a while." Hunter's mouth quirked into a half smile. "Can't say I blame you." He turned back to the stove, giving her privacy to rise and straighten her borrowed clothes. Over a breakfast of bacon and Jonna cakes, they discussed the route to Provo. The river had changed course in some places, Hunter explained, making certain trails impassable. "We'll have to take the high pass," he said, tracing a path on a rough map spread between them. "Longer way around, but safer." Penelope studied the map, her finger landing on a spot marked Broken Spur Ranch. "Is this where you work?" "Sometimes," Hunter nodded. "Old man Jenkins lets me come and go as I please, so long as I'm available when he needs extra hands." "It sounds like a solitary life." Hunter's eyes met hers. "It has been." Something in his gaze made her look away first, suddenly flustered. "I should prepare for our journey." They worked in companionable silence, packing Hunter's few belongings and extinguishing the fire. Penelope's dress and petticoats were still too damp to wear comfortably for a long ride, so she kept on his oversized clothes, rolling the sleeves and pant legs to manageable lengths. Outside, the morning sun glinted off puddles and raindrops clinging to pine needles. The world seemed washed clean, vibrant in its renewal. Hunter's sorrel gelding nickered a greeting as they approached the lean-to. "This is Copper," Hunter said, stroking the horse's neck. "He's solid as they come. Carried me through blizzards and desert heat without complaint." Penelope offered her hand to the horse, who snuffled her palm curiously. "Hello, Copper. Thank you for sharing your rider today." Hunter watched her with a smile as he saddled the horse. "You always did have a way with animals." "They're often better company than people," she replied lightly. "Can't argue with that." He adjusted the stirrups, then turned to her. "Ready?" At her nod, he lifted her easily onto the saddle, his hands lingering at her waist perhaps a moment longer than necessary. Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks as he mounted behind her, his chest pressed against her back, one arm securing her waist as he gathered the reins with his free hand. "Comfortable?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Yes," she answered, though comfortable wasn't quite the right word for the fluttering sensation in her stomach. They set off at an easy pace, the horse picking its way carefully along the muddy trail. The valley stretched before them, a patchwork of meadows and forest set against the backdrop of mountains still capped with snow despite the late spring. After the terror of the previous day, the beauty around them seemed almost surreal. "It's magnificent," Penelope breathed, taking in the landscape. "So different from Missouri." "Bigger sky," Hunter agreed. "First time I saw these mountains, I knew I'd found where I belonged." "Is that why you never came back?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Hunter was silent for a long moment, and she regretted bringing up the past so abruptly. "Partly," he finally said. "At first, I was just running. Took work with cattle drives heading west, learned to track and hunt, guide settlers through mountain passes. By the time I'd made something of myself, made enough to maybe prove your father wrong." He paused. "Well, by then you had Frederick." Penelope stared at her hands clutching the saddle horn. "I waited, almost a year, every day watching the road, hoping to see you riding back." His arm tightened around her waist. "I'm sorry, Penny, I was a fool. We both were young," she said softly. "And my father, he could be very persuasive." They rode in silence for a while, each lost in thoughts of what might have been. The trail climbed gradually, winding through stands of aspen whose leaves shimmered like gold coins in the morning light. "Tell me about your life," Hunter said eventually. "Were you happy with Frederick?" Penelope considered the question, wanting to be honest without dishonoring her late husband's memory. "Frederick was a good man, kind, steady. He treated me well." She hesitated. "It wasn't the passionate love of poetry and novels, but we built a comfortable life together. I was content." "Content," Hunter repeated as if testing the word. "And now I'm starting over, teaching, hopefully, living with Martha until I can establish myself." She glanced back at him. "What about you? Has there been anyone special in your life?" Hunter's laugh was soft against her hair. "No one special. A few dalliances in towns along the trail, but nothing that lasted beyond morning." His voice dropped lower. "Hard to settle for less when you've known what real feeling is." The implication in his words hung between them as they continued their ascent toward the mountain pass. Penelope found herself acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, of the strength in the arm that held her securely against him. Memories surfaced of summer evenings by the creek, of Hunter's youthful kisses and the promises they'd made beneath the stars. They stopped at midday to rest the horse and eat the jerky and hardtack Hunter had packed. Sitting on a fallen log with the valley spread below them, Penelope felt a strange sense of freedom she'd rarely experienced before. "I never imagined I'd see the world from such heights," she admitted, gazing at the panorama before them. Hunter, squatting nearby to check Copper's hooves, looked up with a smile. "Plenty more views like this out west. The Sierras, the desert canyons. Sights that make you believe in God, even if you're not the religious sort." "I'd like to see them someday," she said wistfully. "Maybe you will." He rose, dusting off his hands. "The West's full of possibilities, Penny, not like back home where everything's set in stone from the day you're born." She nodded, understanding what he meant. In their hometown, Hunter had been born the son of a ranch hand, destined to follow the same path. She had been the merchant's daughter, expected to make a suitable match and maintain her social position. The boundaries had been clear and immutable. "Is that why you stay?" she asked. "The freedom of it, partly," he answered, offering a hand to help her up. "And partly because I never found a reason compelling enough to settle in one place." Something in his expression made her wonder if that might be changing. They remounted and continued their journey, the trail now descending toward the valley where Provo nestled beside Utah Lake. As they rode, Hunter pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his years in the territory encounters with Ute warriors who'd eventually become friends. Harsh winters spent in mountain cabins, the changing face of the land as settlers pushed ever westward. "The railroad's coming through soon," he said. "Already changing things. Towns springing up overnight, more Easterners arriving every month. Progress," Penelope mused. "Though I imagine not everyone sees it that way." "No," Hunter agreed soberly. "The Utes and Paiutes are being pushed onto smaller and smaller parcels of land, games getting scarcer, old ways disappearing." He sighed. "Progress always seems to come at a cost." The shadow of melancholy that crossed his face reminded Penelope of the thoughtful boy he'd once been, the one who'd questioned the world while others simply accepted it. That quality had drawn her to him initially, so different from the practical mindset of her father and his circle. "You've seen so much," she said. "Experienced things I can hardly imagine." Hunter's laugh rumbled against her back. "Says the woman who nearly drowned in a river yesterday and lived to tell about it." "That was hardly by choice," she protested, but found herself laughing too, the tension of their earlier conversation dissolving. As they descended into the valley, signs of civilization began to appear: fenced fields, scattered homesteads, then the clustered buildings of Provo itself coming into view. Penelope felt a curious mixture of anticipation and regret. Soon they would reach her cousin's home, and this unexpected reunion with Hunter would end. Unless. The thought startled her with its sudden clarity. Unless it didn't have to end. Unless this chance meeting was more than coincidence, perhaps even a second chance neither of them had expected. "Hunter," she began hesitantly, "what will you do after you've brought me to Martha's?" His arm tightened almost imperceptibly around her waist. "Hadn't thought that far ahead. Might head back to the Broken Spur, see if Jenkins has work, or push on to California. Been thinking about seeing the ocean. Or you could stay," she suggested, her heart suddenly racing. "In Provo, I mean, for a while." Hunter was silent for so long that Penelope feared she'd overstepped, revealed too much too soon. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully measured. "Do you want me to stay, Penny?" She took a deep breath. I think we were given a rare thing yesterday, a chance to find out what might have been, what might still be." She twisted slightly in the saddle to look at him. "Unless I'm reading too much into words spoken in the aftermath of danger." His eyes, those copper-flecked eyes she'd dreamed of for years, searched hers intently. "You're not," he said simply. "When I pulled you from that river, when I realized it was you." It felt like the world suddenly made sense again. "It did," she agreed softly. Hunter reined Copper to a halt, their faces now inches apart. For a heartbeat, Penelope thought he might kiss her, right there on the trail overlooking Provo. Instead, he reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch achingly gentle. "I meant what I said, Penny. I'm not letting go again. Not unless you want me to." "I don't," she whispered. "I don't want you to let go." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, warm, radiant, full of promise. He squeezed her hand, then clicked to Copper to resume their journey. "Then let's find this cousin of yours," he said, "and see what Provo has to offer a cowboy and a schoolteacher." They rode into town as the afternoon shadows lengthened, drawing curious glances from townspeople unaccustomed to seeing a woman in men's clothing riding double with a trail-worn cowboy. Provo was larger than Penelope had expected, with substantial brick buildings lining the main street and a bustling activity that spoke of prosperity. Martha's home turned out to be a tidy two-story house on a tree-lined street several blocks from the town center. As they approached, a plump woman with Penelope's same auburn hair rushed from the front porch, her face a mask of concern. "Penelope, oh, thank the Lord." Martha Graham embraced her cousin as Hunter helped her dismount. "We heard about the stagecoach accident yesterday. I've been beside myself with worry." "I'm safe, Martha, thanks to Mr. Adams here," Penelope said, turning to include Hunter in the conversation. "He pulled me from the river when I was swept away trying to find help." Martha's gaze shifted to Hunter, taking in his weather-beaten appearance with obvious curiosity. "Then we owe you our deepest gratitude, Mr. Adams. Please, come inside. You must be exhausted after your journey." Hunter hesitated, glancing at Copper. "Madam, I should see to my horse first." "Of course, Thomas will help you." "Thomas," Martha called, and a tall man emerged from the house. "This is my husband. Thomas, this gentleman saved Penelope's life yesterday." After introductions and explanations were made, Thomas Graham led Hunter toward the small stable behind the house while Martha ushered Penelope inside, clucking over her borrowed clothes and bedraggled appearance. "You poor dear, what an ordeal! And in men's clothing, no less. Let's get you into a hot bath right away. I've kept your trunk that arrived last week so you'll have clean things to wear." Martha paused in her fluttering to eye Penelope speculatively. "This Mr. Adams, You know him. Penelope couldn't suppress a smile. We grew up together in Missouri. He was a dear friend. Just a friend. Martha raised an eyebrow, her matchmaking instincts clearly engaged. The way he looks at you suggests somewhat more. It's complicated, Penelope admitted. We were very close once before I married Frederick. Ah. Martha's expression softened with understanding. Well, he seems a fine man. Handsome, too, in that rugged way. Penelope felt herself blushing like a schoolgirl. Martha, please. What? I'm merely observing that fate has an interesting way of bringing the right people together. Her cousin patted her hand. Now, about that bath. An hour later, Penelope descended the stairs feeling transformed. Dressed in a simple blue gown, her hair washed and pinned neatly, she felt more like herself again. She found Hunter in the parlor with Thomas. The two men engaged in conversation over glasses of whiskey. Hunter stood immediately when she entered, his eyes appreciative as they took in her appearance. "Miss Garner," he said formally, though his smile was anything but. "Mr. Adams," she returned with equal ceremony, enjoying this proper reunion after their unorthodox circumstances. Thomas, observing their exchange with amusement, excused himself to help Martha in the kitchen, leaving them momentarily alone. "You look beautiful," Hunter said quietly once Thomas had gone. "Like the Penny I remember, but even more so." "And you look quite civilized yourself," she teased, noting that he'd clearly washed up and combed his hair. "Don't let appearances fool you," he warned with a grin. "Still just a cowboy underneath." "The same cowboy who saved my life," she reminded him softly. "I don't think I properly thanked you for that. No thanks needed." His expression grew serious. "I meant what I said by the river, Penny, finding you again. It feels like a second chance I never expected to get." Before she could respond, Martha bustled in to announce dinner. Throughout the meal, Penelope caught Hunter watching her, his gaze a tangible thing that warmed her from across the table. He charmed her cousins with tales of his travels, carefully edited for Martha's sensibilities, and inquired politely about the town and its opportunities. "Provo's growing fast," Thomas informed him. "The railroad's bringing new folks every month. Good business opportunities for a man willing to work hard. And they desperately need a teacher for the new school," Martha added, giving Penelope a significant look. "The town council meets tomorrow evening. You should speak with them about the position." Later, as dusk settled over the town, Penelope and Hunter found themselves alone on the front porch. He would stay in the Grahams' guest room tonight, Martha had insisted, scandalized at the thought of him seeking lodging elsewhere after his heroic actions. "Your cousins are good people," Hunter observed, leaning against the porch railing. "They are," Penelope agreed. "I'm fortunate to have them." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant barking of dogs and the chirp of crickets. "Will you really stay?" she asked eventually. "In Provo, I mean." Hunter turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful in the fading light. "I meant what I said earlier. I'm not letting go again." He took a step closer. "But Penny, I need to be sure. Your husband's only been gone 2 years. You've just survived a traumatic experience. I don't want you to make decisions based on old memories or gratitude." Penelope's heart swelled at his consideration. "It's not gratitude, Hunter. Yes, you saved my life and I'll forever be thankful, but what I'm feeling now." She moved to stand before him. "I mourned Frederick properly. I cared for him deeply and did my duty as his wife. But what I felt for you at 16, what I still feel now at 26, that's different. That's something I've never found with anyone else." Hunter's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her jawline with exquisite gentleness. "I've loved you for 10 years, Penny. Loved you while I rode through deserts and mountains. Loved you knowing you belonged to another man. Loved you even when I tried to forget." "Then don't forget," she whispered. "Remember instead. Remember us." When his lips met hers, it was both familiar and new, the same spark that had ignited between them as teenagers, but deeper now, tempered by years and experience. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as she wound her hands into his hair. They broke apart at the sound of the front door opening, Martha's voice calling Penelope inside. Hunter released her reluctantly, though his eyes promised more to come. "Tomorrow," he said softly. "We'll figure out tomorrow together." Penelope squeezed his hand, happiness bubbling through her like a spring. "Together," she agreed. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in Martha's guest room, Penelope reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken in just 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been a widow traveling to an uncertain future in a new town. Today, she was a woman rediscovering a love she'd thought lost forever. Was it too sudden? Too convenient, perhaps? But there was nothing convenient about nearly drowning, about the years of separation and regret that had preceded this reunion. And if life had taught her anything, it was that happiness could be fleeting, opportunities missed when hesitation overcame courage. This time, she would not hesitate. This time, she would hold on as tightly as Hunter had promised to hold on to her. The following morning brought clear skies and a sense of anticipation. Over breakfast, Thomas offered to introduce Hunter to the owner of the livery stable, who was looking for an experienced horseman to help with his expanding business. "It's honest work until you decide your next move," Thomas said. "Jim Hollister's a fair man, pays well for those who know what they're doing." Hunter accepted gratefully. "I'd appreciate the introduction. I know horses and I'm not afraid of hard work." Martha, meanwhile, had arranged for Penelope to meet with the school board that afternoon rather than waiting for their evening meeting. "Reverend Wilson is eager to fill the teaching position before the new term begins in September," she explained. "I took the liberty of telling him about your experience in Missouri." The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Hunter departed with Thomas, promising to return by supper time, while Martha helped Penelope prepare for her interview, lending her a slightly more formal dress, and offering advice about the prominent families whose children would be under her tutelage. "The Hansons have twins who can be quite mischievous," Martha warned. "And young Billy Peterson has a stutter, but he's brilliant with figures, absolutely brilliant." Penelope listened attentively, grateful for the insider knowledge. Teaching had been her passion before her marriage to Frederick, who had preferred she focus on managing their household. The prospect of returning to the classroom filled her with quiet excitement. Her meeting with the school board went even better than she'd hoped. Reverend Wilson and the 3 other board members were impressed by her credentials and her thoughtful responses to their questions about curriculum and discipline. "The position pays $30 a month, with lodging included," Reverend Wilson informed her. "There's a small cottage behind the schoolhouse that's been prepared for the teacher. It's modest but comfortable for a single person." "That sounds more than adequate," Penelope assured him. Mrs. Hanson, the only female board member, peered at her over spectacles. "And you're certain you wish to remain in the teaching profession rather than seeking another marriage? We would not want to invest in a teacher only to lose her to domesticity within months." Penelope met the woman's gaze steadily. "I was a wife for 6 years, Mrs. Hanson. I understand the commitments of both roles. Should I be fortunate enough to marry again someday, I believe I could balance those responsibilities with my dedication to my students." Something in her response seemed to satisfy the older woman, who nodded approvingly. After a few more questions, the board excused themselves for a brief private discussion, returning minutes later with their decision. "Mrs. Garner, we would be pleased to offer you the position of teacher at Provo School, beginning with the fall term," Reverend Wilson announced. "Would you like time to consider?" "No time is necessary," Penelope replied with a smile. "I accept with gratitude." She left the meeting with a spring in her step, her future suddenly taking shape in ways she hadn't dared to imagine just days ago. As she walked back toward Martha's house, she spotted a familiar figure crossing the street toward her Hunter, his hat in his hands, a broad smile lighting his face as he caught sight of her. "How did it go?" he called, closing the distance between them. "They offered me the position," she replied, unable to contain her excitement. "I start in September when the new term begins. And you? Did you speak with Mr. Hollister?" Hunter nodded, falling into step beside her. "Started already. Man was short-handed and put me to work straight away breaking a pair of Mustangs he acquired last week." His eyes sparkled with satisfaction. "It's good work, Penny. Feels right to be back with horses again." "I'm so pleased for you." She hesitated, then asked the question foremost in her mind. "Does this mean you're staying?" In Provo, Hunter stopped walking, turning to face her directly. In the middle of the busy street with townspeople passing on either side, he took her hand in his. "I'm staying as long as you want me to," he said simply. "Could be weeks, could be decades. That's for you to decide." Penelope felt a flush rise to her cheeks at his directness. "Hunter, we've only just found each other again." "True," he acknowledged. "And if you need time, I'll give it to you, but I spent 8 years regretting that I rode away from you. I don't intend to waste more time pretending I don't know exactly what I want." His honesty was breathtaking, so unlike the careful courtship she'd experienced with Frederick. Before she could respond, a woman's voice called her name. Martha was hurrying toward them, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "Penelope, there you are. Come quickly, there's news from Missouri." She noticed their joined hands and faltered momentarily before continuing. "A letter arrived just now from Rebecca Simmons. It's about your father's estate." Hunter released Penelope's hand, stepping back slightly. "Go on," he said quietly. "We'll talk later." With a grateful nod, Penelope followed Martha home, curiosity and apprehension mingling as she wondered what news could have prompted such urgency. In the parlor, Martha handed her an envelope bearing the familiar handwriting of her father's attorney. Breaking the seal, Penelope scanned the contents, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief as she read. "What is it?" Martha pressed. "Not more troubles, I hope." "No," Penelope said slowly, still trying to absorb the information. "It seems my father made investments before his death that have only now matured. Mr. Simmons writes that there's a substantial sum, nearly $5,000, that he's been holding in trust for me." Martha gasped. $5,000. Penelope, that's a fortune." "Yes," Penelope agreed, her mind racing with possibilities. The money changed everything, or perhaps, more accurately, it removed obstacles she hadn't yet acknowledged. With such resources, she could establish herself properly in Provo, perhaps even invest in property of her own rather than relying on the teacher's cottage. And Hunter. The disparity in their circumstances that had so concerned her father years ago was no longer relevant. She had her own means now, her own independence. "What will you do?" Martha asked, watching her closely. Penelope carefully refolded the letter. "First, I'll write to Mr. Simmons with instructions for transferring the funds to the bank here in Provo. After that—" She smiled, a decision crystallizing. "After that, I believe I'll go for a walk." She found Hunter where Thomas had said he might be, at the livery stable at the edge of town, working with a spirited bay horse in the corral. He didn't notice her approach. his attention focused entirely on the animal circling him with wary respect. Penelope paused by the fence, content to watch him work. Hunter moved with confidence and patience, his body language communicating clearly with the horse in a silent language of trust. It reminded her of the boy who had spent hours helping her overcome her fear of riding after she'd fallen from a neighbor's mare. He had always had this gift, this ability to connect with creatures more through feeling than words. Eventually, he looked up and spotted her. A smile spread across his face as he secured the horse to a hitching post and approached the fence. "This is a pleasant surprise," he said, wiping his brow with his sleeve. "Thought you'd be catching up with your cousin after your news." "The news can wait," Penelope replied. "I wanted to see you." Something in her tone made his expression turn serious. "Is everything all right?" "More than all right." She hesitated, then forged ahead. "Hunter, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about knowing what you want." He leaned against the fence post, watching her intently. And I know what I want too." She took a deep breath. "When you pulled me from that river and said you wouldn't let go again, something inside me that had been dormant for years suddenly awakened. It was as if all the feelings I'd carefully packed away were suddenly there again, stronger than before." Hunter reached across the fence, his fingers brushing hers. "Penny, please let me finish," she said gently. "My father was wrong about you, Hunter. He saw only your circumstances, not the man you were becoming, the man you've become." She met his gaze directly. "I've been given a second chance at life, quite literally, thanks to you. I don't intend to waste it being cautious or conventional." "What are you saying?" Hunter asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm saying that I know what I want," Penelope repeated. "I want to teach in Provo. I want to build a new life here." She squeezed his hand. "And I want you in that life, Hunter Adams. Not someday, not after a proper courtship now." The joy that transformed his face was answer enough, but he climbed over the fence to stand before her anyway, taking both her hands in his. "Are you certain?" he asked, searching her eyes. "Because once I have you back in my life for real, Penny, I won't ever let you go again. That's a promise." "I'm counting on it," she whispered. This time when he kissed her, there was no hesitation, no Martha to interrupt. In the late afternoon sunlight, with the scent of hay and horses around them and the distant sounds of the town drifting on the breeze, Penelope knew she had found her way home at last. The weeks that followed took on a dreamlike quality for Penelope. Each day brought new discoveries about Provo, about herself, and especially about the man Hunter had become during their years apart. They spent every available moment together, rebuilding the connection that had been severed so abruptly in their youth. By day, Hunter worked at the livery stable, quickly becoming indispensable to Jim Hollister with his natural way with horses and his knowledge of Western trails. Penelope divided her time between helping Martha with household tasks, preparing lessons for her upcoming teaching position, and exploring her new hometown. In the evenings, they would walk along the shores of Utah Lake or sit on the Graham's porch, talking until stars filled the sky. Hunter shared stories of his years as a guide of mountain, passes so narrow a horse could barely navigate them, of desert crossings where water was more precious than gold, of encounters with people from every walk of life seeking their fortunes in the West. Penelope told him about her life with Frederick, the quiet contentment they'd shared, the grief of losing him to illness, the suffocating sympathy of neighbors that had eventually driven her to seek a new beginning far from familiar faces. "Were you happy with him?" Hunter asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. "I was at peace," Penelope answered thoughtfully. "Frederick was kind, stable, predictable. Our life together was comfortable, if not passionate." She glanced at Hunter. He knew about you, you know. He did. Hunter looked surprised. She nodded. I told him before we married that there had been someone else, someone I had loved deeply. He said that the past was the past, and he was concerned only with our future together. A sad smile crossed her face. I think he always knew he had my loyalty but not my whole heart. Hunter's hand found hers in the gathering darkness. I'm sorry for that, Penny, for both of you. Don't be, she said softly. Frederick and I built a good life together. I have no regrets about our marriage. She turned to face him fully. But I would have regretted letting this second chance with you slip away. As July melted into August, their courtship progressed with the natural momentum of two people rediscovering a love that had never truly died. Martha watched their growing closeness with approval, though she occasionally reminded Penelope of the need for propriety in their small community. You're the new school teacher, she cautioned. The parents will expect a certain standard of behavior. Penelope assured her cousin that she understood the responsibilities of her position, while privately cherishing the moments when she and Hunter managed to steal away from watchful eyes' brief kisses in the shade of cottonwood trees. Hands clasped beneath the table during Sunday suppers, whispered promises when they thought no one could hear. The letter from Mr. Simmons arrived in mid-August, along with bank drafts that established Penelope as a woman of independent means. After depositing the funds in Provo's bank, she consulted with Thomas about possible investments. Property, he advised. The railroad's coming through next year. Land values will only increase. With his guidance, Penelope purchased a small parcel on the outskirts of town, 3 acres with a view of the mountains and access to a year-round stream. It was raw land with no structures yet, but it represented possibility, a foundation for the future she was beginning to envision with increasing clarity. She showed the property to Hunter on a Sunday afternoon, leading him along the stream to a small rise where the view opened to reveal the valley below and mountains beyond. It's beautiful, he said, turning in a slow circle to take in the surroundings. Good water, good grazing. You chose well. I had help, she admitted. Thomas knows land values better than I do. Hunter nodded absently, his gaze now fixed on the distant peaks. What will you do with it? Build a house? Eventually, Penelope replied, watching his profile, when the right opportunity presents itself. He turned to her then, a question in his eyes that he seemed hesitant to voice. Penelope stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. Hunter, there's something I need to ask you, she said, her heart suddenly racing. Something I've been considering for weeks now. Anything, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. Penelope took a deep breath. The school term begins in 2 weeks. I'll be moving into the teacher's cottage then. She squeezed his hands. But this land, I bought it for us, Hunter, for our future, if you want that too. Hunter's expression transformed from uncertainty to wonder. Penny, are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking you to marry me, she said simply. I know it's not traditional for the woman to propose, but then, nothing about our story has been traditional. For a moment, Hunter just stared at her, and Penelope felt a flicker of doubt. Had she misread his intentions? Been too forward? Then suddenly he was laughing, a joyous sound that echoed across the land, and he lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace. Yes, he said when he set her down again, his hands cradling her face. Yes, I'll marry you, Penelope Garner, though I had planned to ask you myself next Sunday after church. You did? Happiness bubbled through her. Hunter reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. Been carrying this around for a week, waiting for the right moment. He opened the pouch and tipped a ring into his palm, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. It's not fancy, but it's beautiful, Penelope breathed. Hunter, how did you afford this? A flush crept up his neck. Been saving for years. Never knew what for exactly, just felt I should put something aside for the future." His eyes met hers. "Turns out I was saving for you all along, Penny." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Penelope felt tears of joy well in her eyes. Standing there on land that would someday hold their home, with the man she had loved and lost and found again, she felt the pieces of her life clicking into place with a rightness that defied explanation. "I love you, Hunter Adams," she said softly. "I think I've loved you every day since I was 16 years old, even when I tried not to." "And I've loved you, Penny," he replied, drawing her close. "Through every mile, every season, every moment we were apart, but never again." His lips found hers in a kiss that sealed their promise. Never letting go again. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony in the Provo church, with Martha and Thomas standing as witnesses. Reverend Wilson officiated, his kind face beaming as he pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," he instructed Hunter, who needed no encouragement. The small gathering of well-wishers, mostly Martha's friends, and a few of Hunter's colleagues from the livery stable applauded as the newly wedded couple emerged from the church into the bright September sunshine. "Mrs. Adams," Hunter murmured, the name a caress on his lips as he helped her into the wagon that would carry them to their wedding supper at the Grahams' home. "I like the sound of that," Penelope replied, happiness making her giddy. "Though to my students, I'll still be Mrs. Garner. Fewer questions that way, at least until they get used to me." Hunter laughed, climbing up beside her. "Whatever you prefer, my love. I'm just grateful to have you as my wife at last." The school board had been surprisingly understanding about Penelope's marriage, particularly when they learned that her husband was the same man who had heroically rescued her from the flooded river months earlier. The story had become something of a local legend, embellished with each retelling until Hunter's actions had taken on near mythic proportions. "As long as your teaching duties remain your priority during school hours, we see no reason to object," Reverend Wilson had assured her. "Many of our finest teachers have been married women." So Penelope began her teaching career as a newlywed, dividing her time between the schoolroom and the teacher's cottage she now shared with Hunter. It was a cozy arrangement. The cottage had just 2 rooms and a small kitchen, but it was clean and comfortable, with a view of the schoolyard and the mountains beyond. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Penelope grading papers while Hunter sketched plans for the house they would build on their land come spring. They had decided to wait until the school year ended before beginning construction, giving them time to save additional funds and gather materials. "It won't be grand," Hunter cautioned as he showed her his latest design, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and plenty of windows to capture the mountain views. "I don't need grand," Penelope assured him, leaning against his shoulder. "Just room enough for us and the family we might have someday." The look Hunter gave her then was so full of love and promise that words became unnecessary. Their coming together as husband and wife had been a revelation, a perfect blending of the youthful passion they had once shared, and the deeper, more knowing connection they had forged as adults who had experienced life's joys and sorrows separately before finding their way back to each other. Winter settled over Provo with a blanket of snow that transformed the landscape into a wonderland of white. Penelope found herself thriving in the classroom, her 23 students ranging in age from 6 to 16. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying, especially as she watched her pupils master new skills under her guidance. Hunter, meanwhile, had been promoted to foreman at the livery stable after Jim Hollister suffered a fall that left him unable to manage the physical aspects of the business. The new position came with increased responsibility and better pay, allowing them to add steadily to their savings for the spring building project. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside their cottage window, Penelope presented Hunter with a special gift, a pocket watch engraved with the words "holding on to every moment." "It's perfect," he said, clearly moved by the sentiment. "Now I have no excuse for being late to supper." Penelope laughed. "That wasn't my primary motivation, but it's a welcome side benefit." Hunter reached beneath their small tree and handed her a package wrapped in brown paper and tied with red ribbon. "Your turn," he said, watching expectantly as she unwrapped it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover tooled with an intricate design of river waves and mountains. "Open it," Hunter urged. Penelope did, finding the first page inscribed with his bold handwriting. "For my wife, to record our adventure together. May each page hold memories as precious as the day I found you again in the river." "It's beautiful," she whispered, tracing the words with her fingertip. "Thank you, Hunter." He took her hand, his expression suddenly serious. "I want us to fill it with our story, Penny. The good days and the hard ones, the dreams we build and the challenges we face." His thumb brushed over her wedding ring. "I want our children and grandchildren to know how we found each other twice and never let go again." Penelope blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the depth of feeling between them. "We will," she promised. "We'll fill every page." As the new year of 1877 dawned, their life together settled into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and exciting. Weekdays were occupied with their respective work, but weekends belonged to them alone. They would ride out to their land whenever weather permitted, walking the boundaries and discussing their plans for the home they would build. In February, Hunter surprised Penelope by arranging for the delivery of the first load of lumber for their house, pine boards cut from the mountains and seasoned over winter. "It's earlier than we planned," he admitted when she expressed surprise. "But Jim offered me a partnership in the stable, Penny. A real stake in the business. With that and your teaching salary, we can start building sooner than we thought." "Hunter, that's wonderful." She threw her arms around him, delighted by his news. "Jim must think very highly of you." "He's retiring next year," Hunter explained. "Wants to move to California to live near his daughter. Said he'd rather sell to someone who knows horses than some city fellow who thinks a currycomb is for fixing your hair." They celebrated that night with a special supper at the Graham's home, where Thomas raised a toast to Hunter's success. "To the newest businessman in Provo," he said, lifting his glass. "May your partnership bring prosperity and satisfaction." "And to the woman who makes it all worthwhile," Hunter added, his eyes finding Penelope's across the table. Martha, ever observant, noted the special glow about her cousin. "You look particularly lovely tonight, Penelope," she commented as they cleared the dishes afterward. "Almost radiant." Penelope felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Do I?" Martha's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "Oh, are you? Is there?" She gestured vaguely toward Penelope's midsection. "I'm not certain," Penelope confessed in a whisper. "It's too early to know for sure. But I've been feeling different these past 2 weeks." "Have you told Hunter?" "Not yet. I wanted to be more certain before raising his hopes." She glanced toward the parlor where the men were engaged in conversation. "He wants children very much." Martha squeezed her hand. "Well, if my suspicions are correct, you'll make him the happiest man in Utah Territory." By March, Penelope's condition was confirmed, and she shared the joyful news with Hunter one evening as they sat before the fire in their cottage. His reaction was everything she had hoped for, astonishment giving way to pure joy as he gathered her into his arms. "A baby," he whispered, his hand gently covering her still flat stomach. "Our child, Penny." "Due in October, according to Martha's calculations," Penelope said, covering his hand with hers. Just after the start of the new school term, a shadow of concern crossed Hunter's face. "Will you be able to continue teaching?" "For a while," she nodded. "The board has agreed that I can teach through September, and they'll engage a substitute for the weeks after the birth. I can return after Christmas if we feel ready." "We'll make it work," Hunter promised. "Whatever you want to do, however you want to arrange things, I'll support you." His unwavering belief in her, his partnership in every sense of the word, made Penelope love him even more deeply. So many husbands would have insisted their wives give up work entirely upon having children, but Hunter understood her passion for teaching, just as she respected his dedication to his business. Spring brought renewed energy to their building project. With the partnership at the livery stable secured, Hunter was able to hire workers to help with the construction of their home. Penelope would often visit the site after school, watching as the framework rose against the backdrop of mountains still capped with snow. "It's really happening," she marveled one afternoon in late April as Hunter showed her the completed foundation and the first floor joists being laid. "Our home. It'll be ready before the baby comes," Hunter assured her, his arm around her waist. "Might not have all the fancy trimming right away, but it'll be solid and warm for winter." As her pregnancy progressed, Penelope found herself recording their journey in the journal Hunter had given her for Christmas. She wrote about the building of their home, about her students' progress, about the first fluttering movements of their child. Hunter would sometimes add his own notes, brief, heartfelt entries that revealed his excitement and occasional anxieties about impending fatherhood. "Felt the baby kick today," he wrote one evening in May. "Strongest thing I've ever felt, already stubborn like its mother." Penelope had laughed when she read it, swatting his arm playfully. "Stubborn like its father, you mean?" By July, their house was taking its final shape, a handsome two-story structure with a wide porch facing the mountains. The interior was still rough, with walls awaiting plaster and floors needing sanding, but the essential elements were in place. Hunter had prioritized completing the nursery, painting its walls a soft yellow that seemed to capture sunlight even on cloudy days. "It's perfect," Penelope declared when he showed her the finished room, complete with a cradle he had crafted himself during evening hours at the livery stable. "Not quite perfect yet," Hunter said with a mysterious smile. "Still missing its most important occupant." As summer waned and her due date approached, Penelope found herself increasingly ready for this next chapter in their lives. The school term began with her still teaching, her advanced condition drawing knowing looks from students, but no reduction in respect. If anything, the older girls seemed fascinated by their teacher's impending motherhood, peppering her with questions during recess. Their home was completed just in time. In late September, with the first hints of autumn coloring the aspens gold, Hunter and Penelope moved from the teacher's cottage to their new house on the hillside. The timing proved fortunate, for their son arrived just 1 week later, a healthy, robust boy with his father's copper-flecked eyes and a powerful set of lungs. "Thomas Hunter Adams," Penelope whispered, cradling their newborn as Hunter sat beside her on their bed, his arm supporting them both. They had decided to name the baby after Thomas Graham, who had played such an instrumental role in bringing them together in Provo. "He's perfect," Hunter said, his voice rough with emotion as he touched his son's tiny hand. "Perfect like his mother." Penelope leaned against her husband's shoulder, exhausted but filled with a contentment that transcended physical discomfort. "We did it," she murmured. "We found our way back to each other, built a home, created a family." Hunter pressed a kiss to her temple, his arm tightening around her. "And we're just beginning, Penny, just beginning." As the golden days of autumn gave way to winter's first snow, Penelope recorded their son's milestones in the journal: his first smile, the way his tiny fingers gripped Hunter's thumb with surprising strength, the peaceful expression on his face when his father sang him to sleep with old trail songs. Martha visited often, bearing gifts and advice in equal measure. "He looks just like Hunter," she observed one afternoon as she held young Thomas while Penelope prepared tea. "But he has your determination. Look how he holds his head up already." Life settled into a new rhythm centered around their son's needs. Penelope took a longer leave from teaching than originally planned, finding that she treasured these early months with Thomas too much to return to the classroom immediately. The school board was understanding, extending her leave through the spring term with the position waiting for her when she was ready. Hunter's business thrived, the livery stable expanding to include a mail coach service between Provo and the smaller settlements to the south. His days were full, but he always made time for his family, often bringing baby Thomas to the stable for an hour in the afternoon to give Penelope time to rest or write. "He's a natural horseman," Hunter would boast, describing how their son's eyes lit up at the sight of the animals. "Going to be riding before he walks, mark my words." On a crisp December evening, with snow falling softly outside and their son sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Hunter and Penelope sat before the fire in their completed home, the journal open between them. "It's been a year," Hunter noted, his arm around her shoulders as they reviewed their entries from the previous winter. "A year since I gave you this. The best year of my life," Penelope said, leaning into his embrace. "Despite the challenges, despite the sleepless nights with Thomas. I wouldn't change a moment of it." Hunter turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "When I pulled you from that river, Penny, I made a promise. I said I wasn't letting go again." His voice deepened with emotion. "Every day since then has proven to me what a gift I was given the chance to keep that promise, to build this life with you. A life neither of us could have imagined when we were young in Missouri," Penelope observed, squeezing his hands. "Perhaps it needed those years apart, that time of growth, for us to truly appreciate finding each other again." "Maybe so," Hunter agreed, "though I still wish we hadn't lost those years." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "But we have now and tomorrow and all the days after. That's what matters most." From the nursery came the soft sounds of their son stirring. Penelope moved to rise, but Hunter gently stopped her. "I'll go," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead before standing. "You rest." She watched him cross to the nursery. This man who had once been the bold, restless boy she had loved in her youth, now a devoted husband and father, steady and strong. The river that had nearly claimed her life had instead given her a second chance at love, at happiness, at the future they had once dreamed of together. In the journal on her lap, Penelope wrote a final entry for the evening. "1 year since Hunter gave me this book, asking me to record our adventure together. What adventures we've had! A home built, a son born, a life created from the ashes of what might have been. And through it all, Hunter has kept his promise, holding on, never letting go. When the river took me, I thought I was facing the end. Instead, it was only the beginning of the story we were always meant to write together. A story of second chances, of love recovered, of a family forged through faith in each other. Tonight, as snow falls on our mountain home and our son sleeps peacefully, I am grateful for the flood that brought us back together, for the strong arms that pulled me from the water, and for the heart that promised never to let go again." Closing the journal, Penelope rose and moved to join her husband in the nursery, where he stood by the cradle, singing softly to their son. As she slipped her arm around Hunter's waist, he drew her close without missing a note of his lullaby. Together they watched over their child, their future, their most precious adventure yet. And in that moment, with the snowflakes dancing beyond the window and the fire crackling in the hearth, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that Hunter had kept his promise. He had pulled her from the raging waters into a life more beautiful than she could have imagined, and he had never, would never, let go again.